Hello la. Today's video is about Juan Garrido, Black Conquistador. One of the reasons I chose this story is I went to Spain a few years ago and a tour guide in Seville mentioned there were black people there back in the day. At the time, I didn't know what she was talking about, so let's find out. Let's start off with some quick facts about Juan Garrido. This information is from the U.S. National Park Service, and according to them, he was the first African American in the New World, arriving around 1513 as a free conquistador. We'll talk about his place of birth in a minute, but first let's start in Mexico City, where it's September 27th, 1538, and Juan Garrido has to bend the knee to the crown because the slave uprising has raised suspicions about black people in New Spain. This event created the need for him to prove that his loyalties still belong to the crown. He speaks to the court. I, Juan Garrido, a black man, resident of this city, present myself before your grace and declare that I have the need to make a probanza for perpetuity for the king, a report of how I have served his majesty in the conquest and pacification of New Spain. Here we have Juan Garrido's own words translated from the original court documents. He goes on to complete the report later, but first, let's get back to his early life. Juan Garrido was born on the west coast of Africa around 1487 and moved to Lisbon, Portugal. It is unknown how, when, or why Garrido was a free man among the enslaved. One historian, Ricardo Alegria, suspects he was the son of a king. Eventually, 15-year-old Juan left Lisbon and traveled to Seville, Spain, where he joined the convoy to Hispaniola in 1503. Here's how Seville, Spain looked a few years ago when I was there. It's a beautiful city, well worth the visit if you have the chance. Seville has a port where many famous voyages departed to the New World. So let's rewind back to the 1500s and read a little bit about the black population of Seville that the tour guide mentioned. With the discovery of the New World, the black and mixed race population of Seville, both enslaved and free, would participate in the enterprise of conquest and colonization. On Columbus's ships, there were black people, and with the governor of the Indies, Fray Nicolas de Ovando, the first black colonizers, both free and enslaved, arrived. The first mulattoes, products of racial mixing already taking place in Seville and other cities in Andalusia, also arrived. One of these free black individuals who participated in the conquest and colonization of the New World was Juan Garrido. Continuing from Ricardo Alegria's book about Juan Garrido, he says the black population in the Iberian Peninsula, which had been significant since the Muslim invasion in the 8th century, was further increased by this trade. In cities such as Lisbon and Seville, black people represented an important segment of society. Spanish Golden Age literature clearly reflects the importance that black people and their cultural expressions, including language and music, had in Spanish society. He goes on to say that we don't know how he arrived in Portugal. We only have one document, which was written by Juan Garrido, where he says that he, of his own free will, came to Lisbon. Unfortunately, it doesn't say where he came from or why, so the authors resort to imagining how he could have arrived in Seville. If Garrido did not arrive as a slave, but as a free man and of his own free will, it is likely that he was one of the black people who, at the initiative of Portuguese and some African kings and chiefs, went to Portugal to become Christians, learn about Western culture, and serve as ambassadors and representatives of their kingdoms. It would not be surprising if the conqueror had been a member of one of these royal courts of West Africa that sent young people to Portugal to be educated and later serve as intermediaries between African chiefs and Portuguese traders. So it sounds like they were discussing some sort of cultural exchange that took place between Africa and Portugal that I did not know about. So we know he was a free man and he left Spain. First, he went and discovered and pacified the islands of Puerto Rico. And he was also at the pacification and conquest of the island of Cuba with Diego Velázquez. Next, he joined Ponce de Leon in his discovery of Florida in 1513, making him the first black conquistador in Florida. Next, he joins Hernan Cortez, which is included in his probanza. He says, I have served His Majesty in the conquest and pacification of New Spain since the Marquis de Valle arrived and I accompanied him. I was present at all the entries, conquests, and pacifications carried out, always with the said Marquis, all at my own expense without receiving a salary, distribution of Indians, or any other compensation. So his first stop with Hernan Cortez was Isla Mujeres, land of the Maya. So let's read from one of the letters of Cortez, starting with the purpose of the expedition. The principal object of this expedition was to capture Indians to be sold as slaves in Cuba, and the governor furnished one ship on the condition that he should be reimbursed in slaves. The first land discovered was a small island to which the name Las Mujeres was given because of the images of female deities which they found in the temple there. This island lies off the extreme point of the Yucatan, and from it the Spaniards saw what seemed to them a large and important city with many towers and buildings. Next, he made his way to what would become the port of Veracruz. Here is a famous Kodak picture depicting Cortez being received by the Mexica nobles, and notice Juan Garrido is not wearing armor, possibly suggesting his responsibilities were different from a soldier. Next, this Aztec Kodak picture from Wikipedia depicting the march on Tenochtitlan. On the right, we have Hernan Cortez and La Malinche as they encounter another party. Behind Cortez stands his army, rendered as 8 conquistadors, an African slave, a horse, and 3 native men carrying supplies while Malinche translates for him. I notice how Malinche, or La Marina, they made her hair look like devil horns, and I'm pretty sure that's on purpose. Tenochtitlan was the capital of the Mexica, or the Aztecs, who were part of a triple alliance with 2 other tribes. Tenochtitlan was significantly larger than any major Spanish city at the time of the conquest, with an estimated population of 250,000 people, making it one of the most populous and advanced cities in the world. Seville was the largest Spanish city at the time and had an estimated population of 100,000 people. From 1519 to 1521, he participated in the conquest of the Triple Alliance in Tenochtitlan, including the Noche Triste, when many Spaniards were killed fleeing from Tenochtitlan. He is also credited with building the first Spanish ermita in Mexico City after creating a shrine to bury the remains of his fallen comrades from Noche Triste. He eventually got a piece of land in Mexico City and settled down. He also explains here that he was the first person to plant wheat in Mexico. Here is a mural from Mexican artist Diego Rivera representing the first planting of wheat in New Spain by Juan Garrido. After 35 years of conquistadoring, Juan Garrido, who began the act of probanza in Mexico City, requesting his rights as a conquistador, asserting himself as a black Catholic and a free man, returned to Spain in 1541, accompanying Hernan Cortez himself. Juan wanted to ensure that the evidence he sent to the king was well received and to defend his privileges in person, which he did. He would return to Mexico City, where he would die 9 years later, leaving a wife and 3 children. Thanks for listening, and let me know what you think about Juan Garrido. Was he the first African American in the New World?